Daniel, the color of your hair changed.
Yeah, I'm older than last time you saw me.
You are.
It's a terrible
We
thing that
are.
happens.
We are.
I wasn't going to say you obviously haven't aged, but some of us have aged in the last few years. It was mostly translating this book. I was fine until then. I was like 19 until I started translating this book, and it just aged me horrendously. I have scars and bloodshot eyes, and just it's awful. Anyway,
Okay,
I'm still
guys.
here.
I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this special book event brought to you by Interabang Books in Dallas, Texas, and co-hosted by the wonderful organization for literary translation, Words Without Borders. I'm very pleased tonight to have with me Paulo Scott, whose book Phenotypes we will be talking about today. And we also have with us the translator of Phenotypes into English, Daniel Hahn. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I thought it might be nice to start off the discussion tonight with the reading of a short passage from the book. And I think, Daniel, you volunteered to do that for us.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Laurie, and thanks everyone for joining. It's great to be with you tonight. I say tonight, whatever time of day it is, wherever you are, it's firmly the night where I am. I'll read the first couple of, probably just under 2 pages from the very beginning, I think, which gives you a sense, maybe not of the story, but at least of the style of the book. It's only 4 sentences, but a couple of the sentences are on the long side. It's just under 2 pages. So this is the very beginning of the book of Phenotypes. The official came up, opened the door without pausing to ask permission, stepped inside and gestured for me to join him. I stood in front of 8 unfamiliar people waiting for me. Those 8 who made up the commission devised by the new government to find an adequate solution, just the latest in the new government's long list of mistaken adequate solutions, to the chaos that had resulted suddenly from implementing a policy of racial quotas for students in Brazil, that sleepwalking country, the giant ex-colony of the Portuguese crown in South America, branded across the world as a place of ethnic harmony, of so very successful miscegenation, a place where the practice of white men raping Black and Indigenous women had been allowed to run wild for centuries, and as in almost all those lands christened the New World, had been assimilated, mitigated, forgotten. A place where in the 20th century, nobody ever dared, let alone seriously, to propose a law forbidding a Black from getting together with a white with Indigenous with Black, a country that's number 1 in the rankings of the planet's so-called racial democracies, an emblem of a kind of friendliness that is unique, indecipherable, and which people who don't know any better tend to generalize as being a sign of the unrivaled warmth of Brazil. Without waiting for me or one of the 8 to speak, the official just started right in on introducing me, making a mistake straight off the bat, the same mistake so many other inattentive people make with my first name, calling me Frederico rather than Federico, despite the fact that he was actually looking at an A4 page printed in 14-point Arial with a short CV giving my correct name, a CV that he, disregarding the existence of that old thing called Wikipedia, could only have assembled from announcements he'd picked out of a totally indiscriminate online search. He reported that I had been one of the founders of the Global Social Forum in Porto Alegre, that I was an important researcher into the so-called hierarchy of skin colors, on pigmentocracy and its logic in Brazil, on the perversity of colorism, on compensatory policies and their lack of understanding among the Brazilian elites, that I'd advised NGOs in Brazil, in Latin America and the rest of the world, that I'd consulted for Adidas. Oh yes, that's right, Adidas, the famous German-founded company making high-performance sportswear. The man was foolish enough to emphasize, as if that were the high point of my biography. And I did consider interrupting him, saying, like hell did I ever consult for Adidas, that I'd merely acted as intermediary for an agency that did advertising for them with some graffiti artists from the streets of Brasilia for this series of videos they were making to stream on Vimeo, on YouTube, on Instagram, an action inspired by an old campaign produced in the US in the 1980s around the slogan, "Skateboarding is not a crime." But I ended up biting my tongue. I let him continue. In the interest of keeping my blood pressure down, as a 49-year-old man already taking 5 milligrams of Naprix every morning to keep it under control. And the last person to be nominated by our distinguished new president of the Republic to be part of this group of supposed worthies. And then, only then, when he reached the end, and not till he had given me a little good luck pat on the back, did he, the official who had got my name wrong, withdraw.
Thank you, Daniel. That was a great reading. My first question is for Paulo, and I wanted to ask, we learn pretty quickly on that Federico has been called to participate in this commission that is trying to help determine who's really worthy or qualifies for racial quotas at university. And soon we see that there's this tension, this issue between whether a person should have the right to self-identify as who they feel like they are, or whether there should be some kind of objective criteria, almost like a test that you have to complete that will just automatically tell you, oh, well, no matter what you think you are and how you've lived your life and how you've represented yourself and how people see you, this is what you are. And I wanted to understand, and for our audience, kind of how realistic is that in today's Brazil in terms of, it seems almost absurd in some respects, but I wondered, in everyday life in Brazil, is there such type of trying to put objective criteria on something that's so very subjective based upon how someone feels and is raised?
Oh, thank you. That's a very good question, Laurie. First of all, good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with Daniel. Daniel did a very excellent job with the translation. The translation is brilliant. I'm really thankful. Your question is a good question, because this is a fiction book, and the history needs some elements, to be a good history. Of course, I took some things from the Brazilian reality, from the politics of this moment, and I mixed up and I tried to put in a sense of quite of in a dystopic sense, and I stress the elements and the characters and the atmosphere and the scenario, trying to reach this point. Maybe this is it could sound this situation could sound strange for foreigners, but the issue is that we have a lot of points of views when we discuss that in Brazil, because Brazil is a country where the slavery was really important thing in our history, and many Brazilians, rich people, white people, people with a lighter skin, they think that we don't have to try, these policies to reach a compensation because Black people here, because our government in the beginning of the in the end of the 19th century, they decided that Black people couldn't have, health, school, lands, jobs, nothing. And they invite the Europeans, the workers from Europe, to come to Brazil and to occupy these positions, these basic jobs, and if you see the Brazilian history, you can understand that if you remove the racism from the way the Brazilian economy works, the Brazilian economy dissolves in the air. So we do have to resolve the situation. So the quotas in the university here in Brazil, this policy that starts in 2012, in the public discussion, you see absurd, very arguments that you couldn't imagine, So the book it's kind of a lens that I put on this object in this issue, and to promote fiction that is about the angry, maybe, it's about the return, it's about family, it's about identity.
Daniel, did you have anything that you wanted to add to kind of that perspective about? I thought your introduction was really, I think, good insofar as you kind of talked about the craziness of basing racial identity on one factor, and that one factor being skin color.
Right, and one of the reasons it's an interesting issue, an interesting challenge for a translator, is that a lot of what we're talking about is language. We're talking about labels, how those labels are defined, and that is to do with language, and those things don't map directly from one language onto another. And so I wrote this sort of afterword that comes at the end of the book about that challenge of dealing with a book that is about which words people use to describe themselves and to describe each other, and this idea that something as complex as identity can be boiled down to a single spectrum or a single matrix, or essentially one label, and how that's really shown up when you're attempting to translate it into a language where the culture and the history and the social structures that underpin the way we use language are completely different. So the things that Paulo described, of course, have some things in common with the way race and privilege and so forth are talked about in the US or the UK or wherever. But there are also some things that are very different because they're contingent upon particular histories and particular cultures. And so from a translator, the sort of sharp end of this is where it becomes a question of language. Some of the arguments are comparable. I mean, I saw a story today about the Supreme Court in the US agreeing to look at affirmative action, two challenges to affirmative action, which is very close to the subject of this book. But the way it's framed, the language which is used to frame it is a contingent thing, because language is a mirror of the origins of the way we use it, have to do with culture, to do with history, and so forth. And so all the things Paulo said are in a way what made the translation challenging. But there are the things that also, as a translator, I have to understand if I'm going to do a respectful and a more than competent job making this new English thing.
I think that, I don't know whether it's a term that anyone has ever used before. It doesn't seem original to me, but this book almost seems like what I would call absurdist realism in a way. There's so many funny points in the book, and to this question of the commission and what they've been tasked to do, I thought for me, one of the funniest parts was when one of the commission members kind of starts recitating the different colors from the paint store of different versions of light brown or dark cream, and going like the whole way to chocolate. And there's probably like, I don't know, 55 colors in that one paragraph that they're just kind of going on and on about. And that was, it kind of really puts in stark relief, like how absurd this is, this obsession about skin color and what gradation of brown or white or black that you might be. Paulo, we can't hear you.
Sorry, Laurie. I think that the software solution is the top, of this absurd construction in the narrative. Yes, but I think that we are lost if you ask for a right solution. We have next year will be the year that we have to review. We have to sit and discuss again about this policy. And there are in our parliament, we have many guys and girls and guys that don't want, preserve, maintain this policy for Black and indigenous students. So the arguments that you find already are much more bizarre, that the old arguments, and when I decided to put this fiction solution about the software, I was intending, to explain how big is the distance, between the problem and the politics, the government. This government probably this government probably is the worst we had in all our Brazilian history, and all the solutions are getting worse, So I think that this book did, for the first time, from a point of view from a Black guy, with lighter skin, put in the table the problem of the Brazilian colorism, that is very different in many ways from other countries. And it's almost taboo here in Brazil, because we don't want to look in the mirror and accept that we are not Europeans. We are Black country, indigenous country. So I reading the translation for the first time, I start to thinking how difficult it is to reach, with the language, all this complex situation, and a very, historical structural way of see ourselves here. So Daniel really did a very good job. Yeah.
We should probably talk a little bit about Federico and his family, because he's very close to his family. He's very close to his brother Lorenzo. But one of the things to know about them, and you lay it out for us pretty close to the beginning, is that Federico's family considers themselves Black, but Federico himself is extremely light-skinned. His brother, who's his full biological brother, is very dark-skinned, darker
Yes.
than either of the parents. And so this is kind of this racial skin tone issue is one that he's kind of lived with all of his life, and seen how he's been treated throughout life differently than his brother has.
Yeah, that's important point. I start from a true story, okay, to invent, to go to try to find a fiction story, because I came from a Black family. You know, my young brother is really dark skin. You know, my father is a mix of brown and red skin, you know, and my mother is lighter skin, pale skin, you know, like me. But she has indigenous blood and Black blood, Spanish, Portuguese. You know, we are Brazilian. Yeah, I have, you know, I have Scott in my name now. So I think that the fact that the protagonist see himself as a Black man, you know, with a pardo, yeah. Daniel could try to explain what is pardo in Brazilian language. Put him in a, you know, the authority, the empathy that he has with the Black people is different from our white person, you know, or even if you compare with a Black guy that has, you know, lighter skin, and see himself as white, you know, because the white people here in Brazil, they manage this machine, you know, this technology to segregate people, you know. They say like a chromatic scale, when you white, you know, with money, with power, you say to the Black people guys, you say something like, oh, you are not Black, you know, you are like us, you are in our club, you know, stay with us. Even when this guy has a dark-skinned mother and father and brothers, so we can reach the conscience, yeah, of this situation. So when you say, I don't want to see Laurie for a problem, you know, this problem, he keeps growing. So in some moment, I think that the Brazilian situation, because we are really mixed blood here, you know, it will reach or a good solution for to be in with equality, because Brazil is a unique country in this situation. I mean, you know, if you are Asian, if you are look like Asian, or if you are African, or if you are, you know, look like Russian, or you know, German, you could be Brazilian. The Brazilian passport is one of the most expensive in the black market, because that, you know, we are so mixed races that if you're Brazilian, you can look like all races. So it's quite difficult to me to explain, because this is the first time that I'm talking in English about this book. My English is not the very, you know, the ideal English. So, but you know, I think that there are no answers in this book, but questions that Brazilians couldn't do to themselves, you know.
Yeah. The race issue underpins the entire book, but I don't want listeners out there to think that the book is just kind of like a fictional theoretic treatment of race issues, because one of the things that I love most about this book it does so many things. There's a love story, there's a mystery regarding a gun, there's a murder, there's just like, there's so many kind of cool elements in the book. And Daniel, I wondered if you could kind of talk about I don't know, some of the, maybe you could tell us some of the challenges of translating it, and what some of your maybe favorite parts or sections were to translate.
Sure. I mean, there are a number of things that made it difficult, and one of them you will have got a sense of from that first reading, which is to do with these big and really complicated sentences that are not just long sentences that are sequential things. They're long sentences that go here and they double back and then they pick up something from earlier, and then, so they're immensely complicated, but they're also, I think, in a really weird way, they're also very readable. So they're quite propulsive, despite the fact that they are complex. And one of the things that I really, obviously that makes it difficult to reconstruct in English, but it also means that the pleasure of it is it feels like you're being carried by a voice, which is also the thing that I think saves it. I completely agree, Laurie, that it doesn't feel like it's a treatise, you know, a fictionalized treatise. And I think that's to do with voice, and therefore to do with character. And there is so much of it that I think could very easily in a writer who's less good than Paulo, with less ambition as well, could kind of fall towards, I'm going to dramatize 3 points of view. But it's got such a strong sense of, you know, even like in those little sentences, those huge sentences I read at the beginning, it's only 4 sentences, but there is sort of humor and there is a bit of anger, and all of those things of character are built into the structure of the sentence. I mean, I just discovered it's incredibly fun to read aloud, actually, because the sentence kind of teaches you how to read it, because it's so much in a voice, and so the rhythm of it is all kind of controlled within the sentence. And so a lot of the things that are really powerful about the book, including the things that are asking big questions about identity and race and how we present ourselves and how we are seen by other people, the way they appear in the book is through character, which is why I think Federico, this main character, this guy from a black family who passes as white in a lot of situations, why it's such a brilliant way of asking these questions. There's one moment, just briefly, I remember, I've read this book so many times now, so many drafts, and there's a moment that always gets me, which is where he and his brother are at a bar with a couple of friends, and his brother says, "Take a photo of us," and he takes a photo, and his brother says, "You've got to use the flash," and he says something like, "Flashes are for amateurs," and he, you know, moves around and he takes another photo. And the brother says to him, in this kind of lighting, I don't show up well without a flash. And I can't believe, something like, I can't believe you've never noticed all this time, you know, you've been my brother my whole life, and all this time you've never noticed that when you're taking a photo of me, you have to be aware of different things to when someone is taking a photo of you. And it's a very brief moment. It's sort of the end of a section or the end of a chapter, but it dramatizes in a really kind of, you know, punch to the gut kind of way, something that is not abstract and is not theoretical and is not bureaucratic, something which is personal and which is about character and which is about, I mean, guilt and lots of other things going on. So it's a really, I love that kind of moment as an encapsulation of what you can get away with if you have really strong characterization and if you have a really strong voice who's telling the story. Yeah, it's great. Love it.
Yeah, Lisa Dillman, who's with us, and welcome, Lisa. She also indicated that she liked the paint color recitation that I talked about, and then also very much that that scene with the flash and the pictures. That is a really powerful powerful scene. Paulo, would it be too intrusive for me to ask if that was something that happened to you with your brother in real life?
Not really, Laurie, not really. It's a fiction, but this moment of the flash that Danny said, I'd like to ask Danny about that. Don't you think, Danny, that he tried to be close with his brother, the younger brother, but because he has this anger, you know, he can't see all the pictures. Yeah, he's not sensitive enough. In fact, there are many readings about this book, and yeah. Sorry, Laurie, I got lost here. You asked.
No, it's fine. I was just simply asking whether or not that scene with the camera was taken from real life, but you said that was fiction.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, that's fine. One of, I think, the most enigmatic characters, curious character in the book is the character of Douglas, the police officer. And I don't want to give too much information that might spoil the book for anyone, but there's this like a theme of revenge as you read the book, and you pick up on it, and I'm wondering, do you think that's in particular part of the Brazilian character? Is there
not really. No,
okay.
no, not. You know, I try to find a character, you know, the protagonist, Federico. There are many presents around him that proves that shows him to him that he's not the perfect guy that he thinks he is. The guy in that bar in the neighborhood, you know, this policeman that was built by him, you know, his rage, his fury, that he loves, that he thought that was the power of his father, you know, his dark-skinned father, that his father is for him a hero, you know, and he's not comfortable in this lighter skin because he sees himself as a black man. And I think that Douglas shows, Douglas is the mirror, Laurie, because I think that this connection finds his end, and some readers say, you don't finish your novels, you don't finish the connection that you build in the narrative. And I said, oh, you have to read it again, because when he said, you know, the years now go through past, and we didn't learn nothing. We are now old guys, and we're still fighting, you know, running around.
Right.
Our masculinity, you know, our alpha role, you know, our powerful, you know, mission, you know. So he is stupid, and I, the protagonist, I am also stupid, you know, because anger isn't the answer.
He's a very good uncle, though. He really loves his niece, Roberta. She gets into some trouble, and he comes home to kind of try to help, and he stays there. He's also a very, Federico, he hasn't been very lucky in love. One of the interesting things I thought about the book, and I couldn't help by kind of wanting him to get back with Barbara, and that doesn't happen, but he also has a very interesting relationship with another member of the commission. He starts up kind of at first just kind of a friendship, but then it kind of grows a little bit with one of the people on the commission. But I feel like he almost feels like he's afraid of love, or he's afraid to fall in love because his heart's been terribly broken one time.
I think he married the anger, you know, and the anger controls him. And Barbara is, the story has these two lines, you know. The past line is telling in the present, and the present line is telling in the past, and the past is telling, you know, not from the beginning to the end, as from the end to beginning.
Right.
So Barbara shows, I mean, the perception of himself, what he thought he thought he was. Barbara is an element that helps to show, you know, how he thought he was someone, but in truth he was another. He wasn't so. He found a coward inside him that day of the quarter military. I forgot the word in English.
The barracks.
Yeah. So that day then is a very important day, isn't it? Wasn't it?
But I think also Barbara is also really interesting because she is the person who she sees him so clearly.
Yeah.
And so much of it is about how he is seen by other people, sees himself, how his perception of himself changes. And Barbara's the one who always goes, but you are like this. And she's always right. When she says, this is what you're angry about, this is what you're afraid of, this is what you have to deal with, this is the problem, this is the way you are like your niece or not like your niece. She is always right about him. Yeah. And so she has this absolutely, from having been together for a long time, this incredible clarity when she sees him. And that's also a really useful thing for a reader when you have this character who's constantly being presented differently depending on who he's with, to have this person occasionally who comes in and goes, this is the thing that, you know, pointing at, this is the thing that you are still afraid of. That's an incredibly effective thing for a reader to experience, to have someone who has that function in that relationship.
You know, Daniel and Laurie, sorry.
No, go ahead, please, Paulo.
And Roberta is a kind of mirror for him as I talk about that with Daniel. Daniel, I could write, Laurie, Roberta's book, in the end of the book, that could be, that's that warm in the heart. She was the answer, years later. I could put this very short line in the end of the book, maybe Roberta 20 years in the future with the answer, with the solution. But I decided to finish like that because Roberta is the future, and not more powerful, not more, I forgot the palavra, assombroso, Daniel.
But she's also in the very last scene. For people who haven't read it, there isn't, like you say, a kind of 20 years later. This is the hero. About this going to be the person who saves us. But there is not spoiling too much, but there is a sort of the extent to which there is some optimism at the end is a conversation about her, and the conversation is basically. She's really tough, and I think she's going to be a journalist. They say in the car. I think she's sleeping in the car. They say, I think she's going to be a journalist, and I think she's going to cause trouble, basically. And that is the sort of optimism. It's not a solution, but it means that you're left with some momentum. So it's not everyone goes off to the Uruguayan border and then we never see them again. What you're left with is the potential that she is, at least, and that is an optimistic thing. It's not realized yet, but it's potential.
Yeah, and maybe nothing more powerful that a teenager, is sleeping. I heard this history about my friends that had children, and they say that when they fought, discussed it really strong hard discussion. When they go to the bedroom of their sons, and they look to their sons sleeping, they are amazing. They are really powerful because they are the future, and you have to believe that good things will happen to him, from them. So yeah, I think it is a positive. And sorry about the spoiler.
No, I think I thought that the ending was kind of upbeat as well. Paulo. I think also, sorry to interrupt, Laurie, but I think it's also one thing that's really interesting about the structure of the book is the ending. The spoiler isn't really the ending. The spoiler is sort of the beginning. The spoiler is, where did this all come from?
Yeah.
And because the narrative jumps back and forth, you don't find out. It takes a long time to find out the beginning of the story. The end of the story is in a way less important. What it takes a long time to discover is the beginning, and that's the spoiler, which we won't talk about. You've alluded to it a little bit, as the barracks scene, but it feels like that is the thing that is held back from the reader for quite a long time. Is you have to wait until you reach the beginning of the story, and suddenly how all those pieces fit together, which is structurally so clever, with the club and the gun and the barracks and the this and the that and all those things. You finally arrive at the beginning, and that's the spoiler, which we will avoid. Yeah. The ending is fine.
When I was reading the book, Paulo, and I mean this only in the most complimentary way, but there were two authors that I had in mind that your book reminded me of, insofar as this realistic absurdism or absurdist realism, however you want to talk about it. And one was Jose Saramago. And and in particular the novels Seeing and what's the one about the dead people, the Grim Reaper, Death with Interruptions or something like that. But this just kind of like very realistic based, practical everyday life things that like some absurd idea happens or some absurd event happens, and all of the practical implications of how absurd this is. And of course, your book isn't absurd to that level, but it does kind of put into a perspective how silly and kind of unhelpful it is to think about our situation and our society in these kind of colorized compartments. So I kind of thought about that. And then another author that it reminded me a bit of, and maybe you're not familiar with him, he's an American author, Percival Everett. Have you ever heard of Percival Everett?
Yes.
And he does some really interesting things with race and just kind of takes racial issues to like this, I think, almost absurd degree. And so those were two authors that I love very much that your work reminded me of. Daniel, do you have any kind of comparisons? I don't mean to put you on the spot.
You can put me on the spot all you like. I'm not going to have an answer for you. It's worth a try, but I'm not going to have an answer. It's a good and always very difficult question. It's one of those things that I'm going to have to figure out and answer this question, because it's one of the things that when you talk about books that you're introducing to a new culture or new readership, you need to find ways of positioning them in relation to things that people will know. And it's always one of the things that I've been incredibly bad at. I like the idea of one aspect of Saramago and Percival Everett being somewhere in there. One of the things that this has in common with Saramago is also to do with the kind of those sentences I was talking about, because actually from a translator's point of view, even though I'm interested in the structure of the book and the characters and the themes and the questions it asks, the level on which I'm operating is at the level of the sentence mostly. Sometimes a paragraph, but mostly it's the sentence level. And someone like Saramago, who has that thing in common of producing enormous, not just enormous sentences, but enormous sentences that are very complex in structure and that have a really particular momentum to them. I've translated a very little bit of Saramago, and it's just, there aren't many things more difficult than this book, but Saramago is one of them. And so I like that comparison, thinking on that level, on that kind of what can you do with a sentence level. More than that, I don't know. I will think. I will have a better answer next time.
Paulo, it's only fair that we ask you who your influences are. Not that we're telling you who you remind us of, but who are some of your influences?
Saramago is important to me. Borges is much more important to me. Faulkner is much more important to me. Camus is much more important to me. But I met this expert in Saramago in Portugal in the last November, and he told me something like that. They told me that you were quite Saramago descendant, or Saramago, I don't know, Saramago, but you are so different. And actually, I think that I found this way, and then you could explain that better than me. If we talk about the nowhere people, the novel that he translated before this one. And there is this option with deal with the reality, you know, Laurie, but it's a different reality. It's not the absurd is not so present, you know. It's not a presence, you know. It's always the reality, but in a different lens, you know. And you never find where is the difference, I think. And the Riemann, it's from my poetry, because my poetry is this not river, there is English word for that is okay, this line that interrupted. So I start as a poet, and I see myself as poet, So the Riemann is quite of poetry, you know, way to find the ground, you know, to my ground. And I just moved that to the prose.
At the moment, I'm translating some short stories by Machado de Assis, who's the great late 19th century, early 20th century Brazilian writer, who is writing about society of his time. He's an extraordinarily complicated and brilliant and funny and original writer. And in a funny way, I think that there are lots of ways in which his writing is completely different from Paulo's, except for a translator, it's difficult in a similar way. So it's different, it's very different writing. I think the perspective on the world is different. I think the sentences are different, the rhythm is different. But I think that the challenge is very similar, because the challenge is so much about the control of that rhythm on very different scales, and how the control of that rhythm informs the perspective, the viewpoint, the narrators. All of Machado's narrators have a slightly sidelong view of the society that they're writing about. They interfere in slightly surprising ways. And even though the writing is completely different, that precision is very much the same. It's the same problem for a translator. The solutions will be different, but the problems are the same.
Well, thank you both very much. I think we're out of time, but it was so wonderful to talk to you. I want to encourage everyone, if you haven't read it, to go out to your local independent bookstore and pick up a copy of Phenotypes by Paulo Scott and translated by Daniel Hahn. And thank you so much. You've been so generous with your time, both of you, and I've really enjoyed speaking with you.
Thanks so much, Laurie.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Oh, and for anyone listening, we're recording this session, and it will be available after tonight's discussion on our website, and it'll be posted there for quite some time. So you can re-listen to it and rewatch it at your leisure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.